It's time for the Hockey Writers Grindline, a weekly show covering everything Detroit Red Wings. Brought to you by our own iconic top line of Wings writers. Sit back and enjoy The Grind.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back into another episode of The Grind Line here at the Hockey Writers. I am your host, Matthew Zator, and as always, joined in by my defense partner, Devin Little. Devin, how's it going this week? Not much news in the Detroit Red Wings land, but there's a former Red Wing that did sign with the team that I cover, so we'll talk about that briefly. But how's it going?
Going good, man. It's going good. Always happy to be here with you. How many more weeks until the season starts? That's kind of where I'm at.
It's counting down. We're getting closer. We're still mid-August, so we're still kind of a bit far away. But it is counting down. We're getting close. But I mean, we're gonna have a few things we're gonna talk about today. A season preview, I guess, kind of with some of the players. We've got continue our preview series, so it's gonna be fun. But before we get going with that stuff, let's do our first segment, which we always do on this show, one good, one bad. And I will start off with this one. And as I said, former Red Wing signed with Pius Suter, signed with the Vancouver Canucks. So I am happy about that, seeing him in Detroit these past two seasons. He's really good for the Red Wings. Very good defensive two-way type player, can score, good penalty killer. So I'm really happy that he's in Vancouver now. And maybe a little bit sad that he didn't come back to the Detroit Red Wings because, I mean, he was really good for him, but seems like there's not much room for him in the lineup now with all the additions they've made. But we'll see what he does in Vancouver. And my bad is just that hockey season's not here yet. I don't have anything else. But what about you, Devin? Good and a bad from the past week?
My one bad, I'm going to echo your one good. Seeing Suter depart. Like you said, Matt, there wasn't really a whole lot of room for him once all the signings came through, so writing was on the wall. But honestly, even you just look at the contract he signed, 2 years at 1.6. That's a really good contract for a really good player. If you would have told me on July 1st that that's what Suter was going to sign for, I would have told you sign me up because yeah, he definitely fits a bunch of roles, and I'm sure he's going to do really well in Vancouver. Excited for you guys over there. My one good, though, is actually going to be kind of Red Wings related, but kind of also not. It's going to be Moritz Seider and Lucas Raymond attending the Detroit Lions training camp. Obviously, the NFL team. They both kind of they were in town for Dylan Larkin's wedding, and they stopped by the Lions training camp, and fun to see them, hanging out with the other Detroit sports scene, the other Detroit team. Seeing Seider speak German with Amon Ross St. Brown, that's awesome. And Raymond talking with Raymond over on the Lions. So I love seeing the Detroit teams mingle with each other, especially those two, since they're the future of the Red Wings. So. Yeah. We're still a little bit away from NHL hockey, but NFL football is right around the corner.
Yeah, there's some sports starting up, so that's exciting. And like I say, hockey is just around the corner. We're going to be starting to right into the midst of training camp pretty soon here. We got those prospect tournaments going early September, quite a few of them. The young stars in BC here, they're going to be going beginning of September. I'm not sure when Traverse City goes. They're probably like mid-September, I believe, or around that same time, around early September-ish. So, I mean, we're getting close. We're about 2 weeks away from kind of talking really seriously about this stuff. So that's going to be fun. Let's get started, though, or not started, but let's continue with our preview series of the Atlantic Division and get to probably, there's a lot of people are saying they're the favorites in this division to win it, even though the Boston Bruins are part of this. Boston, they part of the Atlantic? Yes, they are. I always miss. I said Carolina one episode, and they're not in the Atlantic Division, but Boston is. But the Toronto Maple Leafs, a lot of places are saying they are the favorite to win this division. So let's continue with them. and start down the middle where they've got some pretty high-end guys. What do you think about the Red Wings matching up with the Maple Leafs this season?
Well, first off, man, Toronto wins one playoff series finally, and now everyone says they're the favorite. Wow. Yeah, but in all seriousness, um, we're gonna go position by position like we did with the other two teams so far. But when it comes to comparing the center depth, this is where Toronto's in a league of their own, at least compared to
Yeah.
the Red Wings. Austin Matthews, probably better than any player on the Red Wings roster, any player. So he's kind of he gives them the win just by default. And then you go down the list and you've got John Tavares, who isn't as young as he used to be, go figure, but he's still highly productive. It should be another solid year in the top six for him. And then you even have Max Domi likely lining up as the third line center. And I think Domi's more comparable to like an Andrew Kopp or a JT Compher, which is going to be the Red Wings second or third line center. So you've got Matthews in a league of his own. You've got Tavares, and that maybe that's a really good point a good point of debate here is whether you would take Tavares or Larkin. Obviously, Larkin's younger, but yeah, just on skill alone, I'm curious who you would take there. But at the end of the day, we're talking about Tavares as a second line center versus Larkin as the Red Wings top center. So down the middle, you got to give it to Toronto.
Yeah, I agree. And Max Domi, he's potentially could be playing wing on the second line.
Yep.
I mean, he may not be the third line center. There's been talk about him being in the top six, playing with Tavares and Nylander. So if that's the case, you got David Kampf as the third line center. So even there, Kampf is probably closer to what the Red Wings are probably going to roll out on a third line. Then the fourth line, you got a mix. We got Pontus Holmberg, according to Cap Friendly, he's their fourth line center, but there's quite a few guys that could potentially slot in there. Matthew Nyes, Ryan Reeves. I mean, you don't really going to compare anything with the Red Wings. He's just a tough guy that could pot a couple goals, maybe. I mean, but yeah, in the top end, it's definitely Toronto. You got Tavares is a top line center on any other team most of the time. So you got, and then Austin Matthews. I mean, not much you can say about him. So I'm going to say the same. I think the Red Wings are a little bit behind, not a little bit. They're quite a bit behind what the Maple Leafs are going to be rolling out down the middle for sure. Hey, let's move to the wing, and they've got quite a few. Like Max Domi can switch. I mean, he can be a winger. Tavares listed could play wing as well. So, I mean, could potentially be a few different guys flip-flopping. But as it stands, what do you think about the wingers? You got Tyler Bertuzzi, former Red Wing now, potentially going to be playing on the top line with Matthews. So what do you think about their wingers compared to the Red Wings?
Well, I think this is actually kind of similar to what we've been saying with other teams, where the top end of it is probably better than what Detroit has, but as you get down the depth chart, things start to go towards the Red Wings.
Yeah.
Mitchell Marner and William Nylander, those two alone. I think the only thing that the Red Wings have that's comparable would be Alex DeBrincat, and then Lucas Raymond, you hope.
Yeah.
And if Raymond takes a step or two, then we can really start to look at this and be like, all right, this isn't as far apart as maybe it is right now, but Raymond's got to take that step to even it out. And then you got Tyler Bertuzzi, as you mentioned, Calle Jarnkrok, Matthew Nyes. I know Toronto's expecting a lot out of Nyes this year. And then you compare that to Red Wings with guys like David Perron. Kopp and Comfort can switch to the wing if they need to. Jonathan Berggren, so on and so forth. I think that, excuse me, I think that outside of Marner and Nylander, these teams are actually fairly comparable. Obviously, like you mentioned too, Ryan Reeves is there, and the Red Wings don't really have a guy like that. I don't know if they need a guy like that. I think if you ask Toronto people, they would probably tell you that Toronto doesn't have a need for a guy like that. But he's there for 3 years, so whatever. I think the biggest X factor in determining who has the edge here basically is going to be Matthew Nyes. Is he like an impact top sixer right out of the gate? Then that is a huge boost for Toronto. And how well does Tyler Bertuzzi fit as well? Everyone knows that Bertuzzi is a good player, especially people who watch this show.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean that you're going to jump into a new team right away and just gel immediately. So if he does fit in right away, Toronto's going to be scary this year. There's no way around it. But if there's a learning curve, if he doesn't fit in quite or right away,
Mhm.
and Nyes maybe doesn't look as good as people are hoping he will, then I think maybe you give the edge to Detroit, at least down the depth chart.
Mhm.
That seems to be where the Red Wings are shining in this comparison series, is down the depth chart, not at the top of it.
Yeah, they got a lot of depth in the bottom. I'd say middle six type
Mhm.
area. So it's like you're looking at guys that, again, they're in the same boat. You got Alex DeBrincat. You're not sure how he's going to fit in.
Yep.
JT Compher, how he's going to fit in as a second line, potentially second line center. So, I mean, they've got some question marks there too. But yeah, I agree. I think Bertuzzi, we'll see how he kind of fits in. Matthew Nyes, great playoffs. But how is he going to play over a full regular season? Where is he going to slot in? I mean, he could be on the third, fourth line, or he could jump into that top six. And Domi jumped, like you said, but Domi going to the third line center spot. And then who's playing there? That's probably Matthew Nye's spot on the wing, in the top six. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how Toronto kind of goes, but we're not in a Toronto preview show. But yeah, I do agree. I think the wingers, I think it's Red Wings right now in the bottom six, top six. They just got too many stars for the Maple Leafs established. But like you said, Lucas Raymond could potentially become a Mitch Marner type player. So we'll have to see. There's very early on in his development, only 2 seasons in. So lots more to come from him. Okay, moving to defense. And this is probably, I'd say it's a little closer on where, we talked about the two teams this past couple where it's been like overwhelmingly the other team, like the Lightning, Panthers. I mean, they're a lot more. But I think with the Maple Leafs and the Red Wings, they're a little more the same. Morgan Rielly is Moritz Seider. I mean, there's your 2 top defensemen. From there, it kind of goes. It's a little interesting. So what do you think about the defense compared to the Red Wings here?
Yeah, I think that I don't even remember if that was this season or the previous one. I think it was 2 seasons ago, that 10-8 game against the Maple Leafs that was just chaotic as all get out. I think that more or less describes where these teams are at defensively, even if it was 2 seasons ago and a lot has changed since then. I still think that's more or less what's going on here. I think what this honestly comes down to is whether you like Morgan Rielly or Moritz Seider more, because like you said, Matt, they're kind of both the team's go-to guys at the top. Obviously Rielly has a longer resume and maybe you are more comfortable and more confident in what you're going to get out of him.
Yeah.
But then Seider's all upside. He's still very young. We already feel pretty confident he's a top line center or a top line defenseman.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of like how good of one is he, right? So who do you take? And then maybe that's your answer. That's who's got the better defense. Because as you go down the rest of it, it's all more or less similar.
Yeah.
I think that one thing that maybe gives Toronto the edge here is having a veteran like Mark Giordano there, who's getting up there in age.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And, you kind of are waiting for that decline to set in. But as long as he continues to play like Mark Giordano, he's going to provide some solid depth veteran defense for the Maple Leafs. And the Red Wings don't necessarily have a guy like that. That's maybe what they want Chiarot to be, but Chiarot's not that. And then even Toronto having a guy like Jake McCabe, TJ Brody, those are both really solid defenders that aren't putting up a ton of points, but their job is more to just take care of business and chip in where they can, right? And then a guy like Timothy Liljegren is there as well, who's got some upside and could elevate this core for Toronto that could maybe put them over. But then you look at the Red Wings, right? And we all know how stacked the Red Wings defensive pipeline is. They've got their veterans already in place, Shane Goss to spare, Olli Maatta, Ben Chiarot, Jake Wallman. And then a guy like Simon Edvinsson can force the issue. Maybe he elevates the group. Maybe Albert Johansson, same thing. Um, I think this is really close to really kind of wrap this up. And to kind of go back to my point here, honestly, it might just come down to um, whether you like Cider or Riley more, and whether you are willing to bet on the youth on Detroit's side or the veterans that are on Toronto's side.
Yeah, and at this point, I'm taking Cider because this is a better two-way defenseman. Morgan Riley is more offensively inclined. And then you got Cider. I really like his two-way game. So at this point, and the fact that he's so young, I mean, he's got so many more years to do stuff. And Riley, 29 now, so he's in that
what he is
prime-ish time, I guess, where he has a few years where he has to kind of capitalize on his athletic prime, and right, and Cider's not there yet, so we don't even know what type of player he'll be at 29 years old. Lots of time for him to develop. So I think it is very close, and it's very, like you say, who do you like more as your top defenseman is probably going to win this battle. And for me, I think it's Cider because of that upside. So yeah, it's interesting. We'll see how it kind of plays out throughout the season of when they do go against each other. What wins out? I think the offense will win out. But all right, let's get to our last line of defense, the goaltending. And the Maple Leafs have Ilya Samsonov, who did sign arbitration deal, and then Joseph Woll, who's going to be their backup. He has Matt Murray, LTIR. So he is not going to be backing up. They just signed Martin Jones as well. Going to be in that mix, but it seems like Woll kind of maybe will have that job, but it's going to be a battle, more of a battle, I guess, when Martin Jones has been signed now. But there's just, I guess, three-headed monster in goal. And then the Red Wings, we all know who they have. What do you think, Devin, about the goaltending between these two teams?
I think this is even closer than the defense. And in fact, I would even go as far as to say that they have more or less the exact same situation. You have your guy who's getting paid to be your starter. The Red Wings have Husso. Maple Leafs have Samsonov. I believe Samsonov is a year or two younger than Husso. So they're both more or less the same age, both like entering or in the beginning years of their prime. So you're kind of content to run with them. And then behind those guys, you have two guys who should be battling for the backup spot. And you have a veteran, and you have somebody who has looked good at the NHL level, but hasn't like cemented themselves as an NHL guy quite yet. You've got your veterans. You got Martin Jones over in Toronto. You got James Reimer over in Detroit. And then on the unestablished side, you got Alex Lyon in Detroit and Joseph Woll in Toronto. And I think that similarly, and both teams have this situation. I think both teams are kind of low-key hoping that the younger guy actually is the backup.
Yeah.
That would be Woll and Lyon. But the veterans are there as more or less insurance policies. Like, if the younger guys are good to go, then yeah, let them be the backup. But if they can't quite lay claim to it, they have guys that they know what to expect from. Martin Jones has been a steady NHL goaltender now for less than a decade, but well, actually no, like a decade at this point, because he was back up in LA for a while. So he's been around for a while. We know what to expect from him. James Reimer's been around a little bit longer than that, but again, you know what to expect from Reimer. So what does this come down to? Honestly, it comes down to Samsonov and Husso. Who do you like better? Who do you think is better? I wouldn't say either of them have really, like, I don't think either of them have done enough to be like, distinctively the correct choice in this debate. Samsonov's obviously, he got like booted off the island in Washington, and he kind of rediscovered his game in Toronto last year. Husso was St. Louis more or less booted him off the island, but they actually like got something for him, and he got to be the guy in Detroit this past season. So that's kind of what it comes down to. Do you like Husso or Samsonov better? And for my money, it's a coin flip. I would take either one of them, honestly.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's like you said about the young guys kind of taking, they are pretty similar. Like Wall had a really good, end of season there for Toronto. Alex Lyon, same thing. And then Wall also played in the playoffs there. And so, I mean, Lyon did too. They're both playing and did pretty well. And then you've got, I find it's kind of interesting in connection to Martin Jones and Reimer. They both played in San Jose as well. So
yep.
A little bit of a connection there too. So Martin Jones a bit more success, actually a lot more successful because he actually brought them to the Stanley Cup final once there too. So it's going to be interesting to see how these two three-headed monsters kind of work themselves out early on in the season, or even throughout, because you don't know when you're going to need them because injuries happen. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting to watch for sure. All right, well, there's our preview for the Toronto Maple Leafs against the Detroit Red Wings. And off the rush, like we've done with the last, so who's winning the season series between these two? Are we gonna see those high scoring games, or are we gonna all of a sudden see some goaltending battles? I don't foresee that, but what do you think?
I mean, it'd be pretty on brand for us to be talking about how this is an offensive thing, and then every game they play is like a 2-1, 1-0 shot, right? So that's definitely what's going to happen. Honestly, if you're asking me to like actually, put money on this and like predict it, I'd say it's going to end up like a tie or pretty close to one. Maybe one team gets 3 points, another team gets 4. They're actually not that far apart. The only thing that really separates them is the high-end forwards that Toronto has. And if Detroit's defense is able to nullify some of that talent, then you're basically even. So I don't know. It's funny because we led this off with Toronto's kind of the favorite in the Atlantic Division. But out of the 3 teams we've talked about so far, it seems like Toronto and Detroit are the closest.
Yeah.
That way, out of the teams we've compared. So interesting stuff, honestly.
It's going to be fun to see how they play against each other too this season. Because again, quite a few new names on defense and up front for both teams. So I mean, there is a lot of parallels though. We're looking at like the goaltending is pretty much the same type of scenario for both sides, and you got the defense pretty much the same. Like you said, then the forwards are pretty much the same except for the high end guys. So yeah, quite even. So we'll see how it all plays out throughout the season. That's going to be fun to watch. All right, before we move on to our second half of the show, here is a message from the Hockey Writers.
Interested in writing for the Hockey Writers? If you have experience writing about hockey, are passionate about the sport, and are looking to take your writing to the next level, the Hockey Writers could be the place for you. Here at THW, you will have the opportunity to hone your craft at one of the world's largest and most respected hockey publishers. You will have control over what you write, be able to seek out media credentials, and be supported by a large network of writers and editors. Plus, you'll get paid for doing it. If you're interested and want to know more about team openings and requirements, please visit the Write for THW page on the Hockey Writers website. A link to that page is also listed in the description.
All right, well, let's move on to some more preview stuff and start our first player previews we did last season as well, last off season. And we're going to start with the defense pairing that probably will become a defense pairing as we did through our projections. Olli Maatta and Ben Chiarot, both probably going to be your third pairing, or the Red Wings third pairing. We'll start with Olli Maatta. Had really good season last year. Played really well when no one expected him to. I think a lot of people thought he was going to be one and done, 1 year and then gone, or even traded at the deadline, but ended up with an extension, a very surprising extension. What do you think about Olli Maatta going into this season? What do you expect from him?
Well, I think Olli Maatta is playing with house money this year because, like you said, I don't think anybody expected him to have as successful of a year last year as he did. Again, we all kind of thought he was going to be trade bait, and then he earned himself an extension. I think Maatta this year basically just has to keep doing more of the same. I don't think anybody has unrealistic expectations for what Maatta brings to the table. We know what he is. We know what role he fits best in. And I think that the Red Wings coaching staff also knows that. And I think that's more important than anything I say, right?
Yeah.
I expect Maatta and he averaged 18 minutes and 42 seconds in ice time last year. I think he's going to play around the same number this season, maybe a little less, depending on how much they want to roll out Josh Spare and Hall and Wallman and Sider. And that's also assuming that like our projected lineups are the lineups too, right? Maybe Maatta lines up with Gosh to Spare. Maybe that's a thing, but who knows? Regardless, around 18 minutes, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. And I think that's perfect for Maatta. I expect him to obviously be a presence on the penalty kill. Just do what earned him that extension.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, last season, one of the reasons why he was so like, wow, where'd this dude come from? Is he put up 23 points. And that was his first 20-point season since the 2017-18 season when he played with the Penguins. I would say that I wouldn't necessarily expect another 20-point season out of him just because it's very rare that he gets 20 points. But I also wouldn't write it off entirely, especially if he's playing with the right people. I just kind of threw Gosper out there. If he's playing with a guy like that, he can get some assists playing with him, right? So what's the expectations from Maatta this season? More of the same. And if you get more, great. If you get less, maybe that opens the door for an Edvinsson, Johansson, whoever to come in.
Yeah, like I do agree. I think he's playing with house money. I mean, he's got he had a great, like I said, great season, but not really a lot of high expectations for him. Just has to do what he did last season, and he'll be good. Playing potentially with a veteran defenseman, probably. I mean, I don't see Chiarot kind of going higher in the lineup, but you never know. I mean, that's what our projections are. If he ends up potentially becoming, well, let's move on before we start talking about Chiarot. Ben Chiarot, he was a pretty big signing in free agency not this offseason, but last offseason. And I'd say the expectations are pretty high for him. And he did start playing on the top pairing with Moritz Seider. Didn't really work out. Not really that good. I mean, a lot of people want him traded, want him out of here already. But what do you expect from Ben Chiarot this season? Potentially, hopefully, a bounce back season for him.
Yeah, that's it right there. And I think that the reason why there's maybe some hope that he will have a rebound season is because I think we all know now that it doesn't work next to Seider. And so that's not something that we should expect to see, unless they like found some chemistry over the summer or whatever. But that's a discussion for later, I guess. But regardless, basically, I'm expecting Chiarot to play a lesser role this season than he did last season, and I think that's going to help him. And I think it's going to help the Red Wings too, for what it's worth. Now, one thing that might be really interesting is when Chiarot wasn't playing with Maatta at the end of the season, he was playing with Edvinsson. That was Edvinsson's partner at the end of the year. And if a guy like Edvinsson happens to make the team, I think most people would throw out Chiarot as the guy to come out of the lineup to make room for Edvinsson. But Chiarot and Edvinsson actually looked pretty good next to each other. In fact, I would say Chiarot probably played his best hockey alongside Edvinsson. So maybe you don't bring out that guy. Maybe you bring out Maatta, or maybe whatever.
Yeah.
There's also the fact that Chiarot wore an A for the Red Wings for most of the season. They kind of rotated it with Kopp, Perron, and Chiarot, but Chiarot had an A on his jersey more often than he didn't. And I think that typically means something. They don't just kind of hand those out willy-nilly. And so I do expect him to continue to be in a leadership role for this team for the time being. And that means he'll probably have a pretty consistent spot in the lineup too. Now, what do I expect from Chiarot? I expect him to just point blank be better than last year.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to, look like an all-star by any means. I don't think he's capable of doing that, to be quite honest. But point is that he doesn't need to like completely be a different player. He just needs to be better than he was last year. And you'll feel a lot better about it. And like I said, I think playing lower in the lineup and not being alongside the top defenseman will help him in that regard and not leave him to be exposed. Because he does have some shortcomings in his game. And when he's playing top line minutes, they get exposed quite a bit. So one other just quick thing to wrap this up too is I also want to see Chiarot be a bit meaner than he was last year. He had 147 hits, so it's not like he didn't hit people, but there were a lot of like he was brought in, and one of the things that everyone was talking about was how he's going to make sure people weren't taking cheap shots at Cider or Raymond or whoever. And a lot of times that stuff would be happening, and Chiarot would just be like over there, like minding his own business or whatever. And it's like, aren't you like supposed to be like taking care of this? Isn't that why you're here? So I'm not expecting him to beat people up. It's pretty clear that's not who he is. But I would like to see him in those scrums a bit more and making sure that people aren't taking shots at their best players. He's a big dude. He's been around the block a few times. He's one of the team dads, so to speak. He's got to play like it. He's got to assume that role and really own it. So Chiarot has a chance to be the Red Wings' worst defenseman this year. But for his sake, for the Red Wings' sake, you got to hope that he's not.
Yeah, I agree. And that minus 31, that's not
good.
Not a nice number. It's not good. And the thing is about him too is like he was really good in Montreal, and that's what I think. What Florida was hoping he was going to be there. That's what I think Detroit's hoping that he potentially could get back to that as well, because he was one of their best defensemen in Montreal, especially during the bubble playoffs there when they surprisingly got through a few really good teams, and he was one of their best, and they got to the Stanley Cup final, and he was one of the reasons why. So, I mean, hopefully that he could maybe get closer to that. I don't know if that's possible. He's, like I say, he's getting up there in age as well. He's 31, will be 32 this season. Already 32, never mind. He is 32. He turned 32 in May. So, I mean, he's getting up there in age. So maybe it's unrealistic to hope he gets back to that when he was in his later 20s, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. I hope he does, because I think in a lower role, a lesser role, not playing as many minutes. And I see these parallels between him and Tyler Myers, where they're good in small portions, but if you give them too many minutes, you see too many mistakes because they're just given too much more space to make those mistakes. I think what it is, you give them too much ice. If you haven't given them less time, they won't make as many mistakes. And I think that's where you want to kind of manage where he is in those high danger, high pressure situations where you're not putting him in that position. So we'll see. I think Chiarot has potential to be a good defenseman again. It's just, will it happen? And hopefully it does. Okay, moving on. Comment corner time. And Don returns to the comment corner with another question here. And it is, what could be an issue for the Red Wings at the start of this season, which we're hoping is going to be a good start to the season? Devin, what do you think could be a problem early on?
I mean, let's be honest, it can be a litany of things. You got a lot of new faces, maybe they don't gel, and that can disrupt the entire team's flow. They're pretty lucky last year that everybody seemed to like gel pretty quickly and pretty easily, except for Chiarot and Cider, but they fixed that by the time we hit January. So honestly, what I'm gonna pinpoint here is goaltending. We just talked about what their goaltending depth chart looks like. We have a lot of faith in Husso. We saw a lot of good out of Husso last season, but we also saw that he is far from like a consistent, bona fide elite goaltender. He's just not quite there yet. So if he gets off to a rough start, which is possible, it's not like they have, the best insurance policies behind him. They have some good goalies. Both Reimer and Lyon can have proven in the past that they can give you good goaltending. But A, we don't know which one of them is going to be the backup yet. And B, it wouldn't be that surprising if they kind of just came out flat. Just like I said, Husso's not exactly a guaranteed thing in the NHL quite yet. I wouldn't say Lyon is, and I would say that Reimer has had spurts where he has been below average. So coming out of the gate, if the goaltending isn't spot on, isn't sharp, it doesn't matter how much offense, how much grit they've added, how much defense they've added. Those pucks are going to go in and it's going to deflate the team. There's nothing worse than riding the high of a new season and new faces and new energy, all that good stuff. And then, a goalie lets in a muffin and then another one goes in and all of a sudden all that energy is just gone. Yeah. So I'd say their goaltending isn't mistake proof. And that could lead to a deflating beginning to the season.
Yeah, well, beginning of last season, really good. Husso was probably one of the best goaltenders in the league right at the beginning, and keeping the Red Wings in a lot of games, and then he kind of fell off. So, hopefully, you can't expect him to stay that crazy throughout the season, but you're hoping that he kind of goes into an average, at least good, and doesn't have those stretches where he's not that good. So, you're hoping that. And then the goaltending and backup position as well is good too, because they did have some issues in that department too. So, Nedeljkovic was up and down. He wasn't that good at times. When I was hoping that was going to be a good 1A, 1B tandem. Didn't happen. So hopefully, I do agree. I think goaltending could be an issue to start. Mine is the new faces. Like DeBrincat, you're hoping that he gets and hits the ground running. You don't want him to be, 10, 15 games into the season, he hasn't scored yet. That could serve some red flags when he's a big part, supposed to be a big part of the offense. Guys like Comfort, second line center, if he doesn't start off really well, you have a problem. So I think that's a big thing that could be an issue to start, because you're hoping that everyone fits in right away, but that's not always the case, as Calgary fans can say. New faces don't always work out right away.
And I do want to throw up real quick, only because you brought up Nedeljkovic and it kind of spurred the thought. 2 seasons ago, Nedeljkovic started the season really strongly and then kind of just fell off the face of the earth in the latter half of the season. The latter half of the season, going to the offseason, they pick up Husso, going to have a great 1A, 1B. And then last season starts up and Ned just never finds his form. Ends up going to the AHL, and by the time he actually starts to look good in the NHL level, it's too late. And he's not a Red Wing anymore. It's a Penguin. So I would say that that could happen with Husso. It definitely could. Husso is a year older, and he doesn't play the same style. He's a bit more technical than Ned is. So maybe there's a bit more hope that Husso is a bit more reliable in that sense, but you never know. He just hasn't proven himself yet to where I think you go into the season thinking it's a slam dunk that Husso is going to be the Husso from the beginning of last season.
Yeah, you're hoping that he just starts consistent and just stays consistent. It's sometimes bad when these goalies start off to this huge hot streak, because it's not sustainable. Yeah. You're having a bunch of shutouts, and you're not going to get that all season. But we'll see. I think Husso, one season with the Red Wings, you got better defense in front of him. Maybe he's a better goal, not better, but more consistent throughout the season, because I think he was pretty good at quite a bit. It's just he went in through those areas where he wasn't good. And that's what ended up being the difference, I think. All right. Before we leave, let's go to our last off the rush and go back to Olli, Maatta, and Ben Chiarot. And Devin, who has the better season between the two? I guess not points wise, because they're both not offensively, they're not big offensively, but who has a better season as an overall defenseman?
See, last season tells you that this should be Maatta, and I shouldn't really be thinking too hard about this. But I also think that half a season not on the top line is really going to help Chiarot. I think that the Red Wings have more invested in Chiarot to be good, and they like have an invested interest to make him as impactful as possible. And like I said, he looked pretty good alongside Edvinsson. If Edvinsson ends up being a factor in the lineup, Chiarot could be their go-to guy with him, and that could definitely help him look better. And I just kind of also threw that out there earlier too, that maybe Maatta's the guy who comes out of the lineup to make room for an Edvinsson or whoever. So I'm gonna go out on a limb and say Chiarot because it has to be Chiarot.
Yeah. I'm gonna say the same. I think Chiarot has a lot more expectations, and I think he's going to be in a better position role-wise. Like I said before, I think his minutes are going to be cut down. He won't be playing that out of position on the top pairing. I don't think he should have been on the top pairing. He doesn't fit well with Zator. I mean, that was just how it was. So, I mean, I think if he doesn't do that, he's not put in position to succeed, is what I'm saying. And if he's put there, I think he has a better season. So I'm going to go with Chiarot as well. But I think Matt is still going to have a good season. It's just,
me too.
It has to be Chiarot. I agree for a tall goal. Okay, another episode in the books of the Grind Line here. Thanks, Devin, for joining in on the discussion again. We'll continue our preview series next episode with another team from the Atlantic Division. We got a few left before the season gets going, and preseason is getting there. We're close to a month away. But yeah, hockey season just around the corner. We're still in the dog days, and we're still waiting for Joe Veleno's contract. Let's get it. Come on, let's go. But the countdown, we got to have, when is it going to happen? We got to start taking bets here. But yeah, it's going to be a fun season to cover for the Red Wings. So lots of interesting storylines to start training camp. But yeah, and make sure you're following along on thehockeywriters.com. We've got preview articles coming out. I still have not done my prospect spotlight, but it's coming up. It will come. Hoping to get that done this week. So that's in the pipeline. Also going to be talking about some players that could potentially bounce back this season. Spoiler alert, Ben Chiarot's one of them. He's going to be in that article. So keep an eye out. Devin, I know you've got some articles in the works. You put out some preview articles. I believe Moritz Seider's on the docket next.
Sure is.
There you go. So keep an eye out for that and all the other Detroit Red Wings writers as well, the hockey writers. We've also got YouTube roundtables coming out as well. Hopefully get a Red Wings going, but we have this show, so we don't really need it. We have a roundtable every week. So, but check those out if you're inclined to kind of see what other teams are doing. But make sure you're giving us this video a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already, and follow us on TikTok at THW Grindline for all the updates on the shows coming out. But until next time, we'll see you on another episode of The Grind Line.